Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. I hope you are in a good condition, healthy and safe. So we are from the 5th group and there are two of us. I am Sheila Agustin and my another partner is Ian Marianto. In this section we are going to deliver you an explanation about the illustrating with examples technique in micro teaching. So here are our outlines or the table of contents. We do have illustrating skill, objectives of illustrating skill, illustrating approaches, components of micro teaching skill, precautions, and of course the illustration. So we're moving on to the first one, illustrating skill. What is illustration? An illustration is a decoration of some words that defines or explains a concept, explanation, or visual indication of a text, idea, or a process. So it is designed for making a concept easier in a proper media such as posters, charts, magazines, books, teaching materials, film pictures, videotapes, games, and films. The teacher typically creates an illustration, and that also known as an example. So either it is in writing or in the picture form. And then we're moving on to the next one. What is illustrating skill? Some of the questions like what is the role of illustration or examples in the teaching learning process? What if a teacher explains with the help of examples? What is illustrating? These are the frequently asked questions that arise almost in everyone's mind. A teacher teaches with examples and makes a topic very easy for students. That's the explanation, the basic explanation what is illustrating. So basically the teacher teaches with examples to make easier, to make students understand it easier. So if a teacher has a bit of less mastery in giving example, he is not able to explain the complex topics. So in simple words, we can say that the use of different diagrams or other examples and clarifications with the help of some examples is illustrated. In this skill, a teacher must be trained. If he is not, then the teaching may not achieve the goal set up before. The examples which are being given during the teaching learning process are very relevant to the topic so that they use in teaching. If the examples are not related to the topic, they may misguide the students. So the teacher must have the skill of illustrating. The power of illustrations has its purpose in the teaching learning process. That's why they are also very important. And the next one, we're going to explain about the objectives of illustrating. Like I said before, illustration has its purpose, right? So the following are the few objectives of illustrating. The first one, to make a lesson interesting. Of course, some students sometimes got bored in the class because the teacher just give, the lecturing session or something, and that is boring. So some teachers should give an illustration to make students more involved in the class. And then the second one, to relate known knowledge to unknown knowledge. Yes, of course. The average knowledge of students are very different one to another, so the known knowledge may relate to the unknown knowledge of students, and that helps. And then the third one, to make complex things easy and interesting. Yes, to make students easier to understand. And then the fourth one, or the last one, to make the use of multiple senses or fronts of students. So students can learn better by knowing the right sense of the subjects, of the topics that being taught in that class. And then after the objectives, we're moving on to the approaches of illustrating. How to use an example? What kind of example is suitable for teaching? There is a way of selecting the proper example. We can say the approaches of using illustrations, which usually helps a teacher know the type of example and its usability. There are two main approaches surveys that help a teacher to select a suitable example during teaching and learning process. These two approaches are as follows. So the first one is a verbal approach. The verbal approach is the sharing of information between the teacher and the students using words. So it is a basic communication that we did every day, like one individual talks to another individual using words. And then the next one is nonverbal approach. Nonverbal approach here is the sharing of information between the teacher and the students using platforms such picture, video, and others. So how verbal and nonverbal approaches can relate to the approaches of illustrating, because we do have two kind of communication, right? The verbal and nonverbal approach. And don't you think that illustration can only be illustrated by pictures, images, or videos? It is also can explained or illustrated by words, like you can tell a story. So we're moving to the next one to make it clear. There are the picture of the verbal approach examples. You can use the word pics or by story, telling something relatable to the topics, telling about a story that related to the subject that you are teaching at that time. You can use it as an illustration to your students. And then examples of comparison, for example, you comparing something to another thing, a figure to another figure, and so on and so forth. And of course the examples, but yes, still using words. And then the next one is the examples of non-verbal approach. You can use models. Perhaps you can make your students come forward as a model, and then charts, diagrams, and maps. You can use it as an illustration, of course. And then the real object, like you bring some stuff to the class, and then the examples like through movie, like I said before, to video and other stuff. So that's all that I can explain. Another or others or other points will be delivered by my friend Ian Marianto.
Okay, for the next material about components of micro teaching. It has been observed that some abstract ideas or concepts are very difficult to teach. In spite of their best effort of explaining the concept, the teacher are unable to convey the true sense and meaning of the concept. This difficulty of the teacher can be solved easily if they are able to master the skill of illustrating with example. The first, formulating simple example. A simple example is one which is related to the previous knowledge of pupils. It should be according to the age level, grade level, and the background of pupils. The second, formulating relevant example. An example is relevant to the concept when the concept or the rule can be applied to it. This means to say that the rule is explained by the example. And the third, formulating interesting example. An example is interesting if it can arouse curiosity and interest of pupils. This can be judged by the attending behavior of students. In the pupils keenly attend to the example, it is really interesting. And the last, using example by inductive deductive approach. This involves the teacher giving example relating to the concept or rule to clarify it. The pupil, on the basis of the example given, formulate the rule. After this, the teacher asks the pupil to give example to text to test whether the pupil has rightly understood the concept or not. Okay, for the next matter about precaution. Important thing for the teacher likely the first, all the examples should be related to the specific object. And next, their example should be related with the concept being taught. And they must be interesting. And the next, all these examples should be as the for the standard of the student. And the last, they must be or different kind shall not give only one type for example. And the last material about illustration, likely in the picture. With the help on this skill, the teacher becomes enabled to command and to have the attention of the pupils with remarkable effectiveness. Besides, this skill can stir up emotion and thus may reach the conscience and the heart of the student. The skill is also an effective memory aid and thus it must be used by every teacher for result-oriented teaching. Illustration combined with example usually requires only a few words, yet they can paint vivid mental image and if chosen careful and used skillfully, they can prove out to be very fruitful. However, a teacher may reinforce their value by adding a brief explanation. This specific skill may include numerous illustrations and example drawn from practical experience by the teaching which can be used in the teaching. The illustration with example skill of micro-teaching is so essential in the context of the topics that sometimes the illustration themselves can explain the content of the topic concerned. Illustration along with the example, if they are quite accurate and appropriate to the content of the topic concerned as well pleasing to the eyes, then they would serve the purpose of the teacher in a rewarding manner. The picture must support the less the number of the word, the more the illustration must convey. Understanding how illustrations show visual elements such as line, color, shapes, texture, and composition can help to appreciate and understand the artist's intention to the artwork. The student will also be to identify illustration styles such as realistic, impressionist, expressionistic, abstract, primitive, and surrealistic. Early exposure to the illustration along with related example helps to develop aesthetic sensitivity and amongst the student. Maybe enough for material for me. Uh, Thanks for attention and see you next time.